This video is presented by Chesco Sports, your one-stop shop for sports betting content. If you haven't already, drop the page a like and a follow. Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new video by myself, Jamie Theo MMA. You may not know me, you may not have seen me before, so I am Jamie Theo MMA and I'm here to give you my Dana White's Contender Series Week 6 predictions and best bets. The Contender Series has been slightly lacklustre so far this season. We have seen a few upsets and we've seen a few favourites do what they were supposed to do. I'm hoping this week we see some really good fights because, like I said, the previous weeks have been slightly lacklustre, and for what Contender Series usually brings us, it's been quite disappointing. But we're going to get straight into the video. We're going to get straight into my predictions for this week, and we're going to start off with the first fight, which is Julia Polastri versus Patricia Alujas. This one, it's a weird fight because Julia Polastri isn't someone that I'm massively high on, but neither is Patricia Alujas. I know that Polastri has previously fought on Contender Series where she fought Jasmine DWCS and she got dominated over 3 rounds, which, okay, that doesn't look so bad now because Jasmine has gone on to look really great and she's currently in the rankings. So that one's not one that looks all that bad. But Polastri, for me, hasn't been that impressive in her last few wins. She won the LFA strawweight title in her last outing against Brenda Gottig. It was for the vacant title. And then before that, she beat Blanca Sattelmayer. Polastri just isn't someone that I've been that high on. She's got decent striking. She has got decent striking. She looks to get in the face of her opponent and use her Muay Thai speciality. But for me, she just doesn't look that precise and that crisp with her striking that I think she's UFC level. Don't get me wrong, I think if she did come into the UFC, she could pick up a few wins because there are a few women in that division specifically that I think she could beat. She's the biggest favourite on the card. She's currently a -400 favourite, which is that's a big kind of line for her. Like I said, she's not someone that I've been massively impressed with before. She got taken down at will against Jasmine DWCS, and obviously, like I said, Jasmine has gone on to do great things, so maybe that one doesn't look as bad as Jasmine has kind of gone on and picked up more wins. But she got taken down at will against her. She does have a couple of submissions on her record, Polastri does. So when the fight does go to the ground, it's not as if she does just lay there and get dominated. She does try and look for submissions. She does try and work back up to the feet, where she does like to try and get her striking going. She's quite boxing heavy though for a Muay Thai specialist. I'd like to see her use some more kicks and utilise kicks in her game a bit more. But then moving on to Patricia Alujas, she's boxing heavy. Her movement isn't great. She's not got great head movement. When somebody tries to press her, she looks to just throw looping counters, and that's something that Polastri will do in this fight, I think. I think she'll try and press her, and she'll try and look to put on the pressure because I don't think Patricia Alujas can deal with that so well. She tries to throw looping hooks and looping counter hooks when she's working off her back foot, and it looks kind of sloppy, and she gets into kind of sloppy exchanges. I do think Polastri does win this fight, and I will be taking her by round 2. That is my prediction. I think she'll get the finish in round 2. But I wouldn't be surprised to see this be quite a scrappy fight because, like I said, Polastri isn't someone that... I'm not saying that she's not a good fighter, and I'm not saying she doesn't deserve to be in the UFC, but I'm saying that the kind of calibre of opponent she's been fighting so far, she hasn't looked as impressive as some of the others have before her. A very interesting thing to note is that Patricia Alujas hasn't fought for 634 days. That's a massive layoff for someone that's coming into the Contender Series fighting the LFA strawweight champion, and I think a lot of that is going into the betting line, and that's why she's such a big underdog. She hasn't been active, and in a fight in the Contender Series, not being active and then going in there and fighting someone who's fighting for a UFC contract, that's a really big ask. So for me, that's another reason why Patricia Alujas is a massive underdog. The next fight after that, we've got Eduardo Neves versus Jhonata Diniz. This one again, it's It's a weird fight because both of these do have tendencies to be quite sloppy. Eduardo Neves especially looked very sloppy in his first Contender Series fight against Mick Parkin. Mick Parkin went on to go and win his UFC debut, and he's one of those heavyweights where he kind of looks like a new breed of heavyweight. A heavyweight that moves light on his feet. He's quite fast, a bit like his teammate Tom Aspinall. But Eduardo Neves in that fight came out like a bull in a china shop. He went out there, tried to get the finish really early and couldn't get it done. And then from there you saw Mick Parkin take over and just kind of take the fight to Eduardo Neves and then seemingly just easily dismantle him on the ground. Eduardo Neves, obviously, as he is, he's a big power puncher. 7 wins by knockout, so he is someone that is going to want to go in there and just completely take your head off. He's going to come out fast. He always comes out fast. He comes out fast, but in his last fight, he did show a little bit more patience. He stayed light on his feet. He moved backwards well, and he looked to counter well on his back foot. He showed a slight improvement with his takedown defence in his last fight as well, because like I said, in that Mick Parkin fight, he got taken down quite easily, and he gassed out very, very fast. He went for that finish, couldn't get it early, and then just gassed out massively. He does come in fast, and that's something that he's got to try and be patient. And like I said, in his last fight, he did show slightly more patience, but he does need to just carry on and be patient in these fights and look to try and pick his opponent off at range. But that's going to be tough in this fight because Jhonata Diniz is a kickboxing specialist. He's fought in Glory before. He hasn't fought at a very high level in MMA, but having fought in Glory and had that experience fighting in the kickboxing scene at that high level, I think coming into MMA, he didn't really have to go and fight at the highest level to begin with. That's not a massive red flag because you know what heavyweight MMA is like. Anything can happen, and it's one of those ones where fighters do have a lot of losses on their record as heavyweights because they're all big hitters. So for me, it's not a massive red flag that Jhonata Diniz hasn't fought at the highest level, because like I said, it's heavyweight MMA, and that's not for me a big red flag. Diniz is far more patient than what Eduardo Neves is. He showed a lot of patience in his fights where he tries to pick his opponent off at range with his punches. I'd like to see him use his kicking a bit more. He does use his leg kicks a bit, but I'd like to see him mix it up, go to the body with those kicks, go to the head if he can, and just mix up those leg attacks because everyone knows he's a kickboxing specialist. So to use those kicks, he needs to start mixing it up, and that's something I'd like to see him do a bit more against Eduardo Neves because he can really stop the movement of Neves and really kind of just debilitate him into a position where he's just against the cage and can't really move, and that's where he could really just take over this fight. But I do think that he does have a striking edge in this fight, and that's why I will be picking Jhonata Diniz to win this fight in round 1. Fight after that, we've got Matsumoto versus Kasey Tanner, and this is a very interesting fight for me. And the reason why I think this is quite interesting is because, again, Kasey Tanner is someone that he hasn't fought for such a long time. He hasn't fought for 579 days. So again, it's another big layoff, and that at the level that he's fighting at, the bantamweights as well, we've seen how many incredible bantamweights come into the UFC and just look like they could be fighting at the highest level straight away. Matsumoto could be one of those guys. I think he is UFC level. I do think he's UFC level. But for me, I think Kasey Tanner looks to be the better fighter here. The big red flag here, and like I said with the last fight, is the fact that Kasey Tanner just hasn't been active enough. He fights at Fight Ready MMA, which is a very good gym. He trains with the likes of Henry Cejudo, and that he shows that in his fights because he's very well rounded. But for me, it's just a massive red flag that he hasn't fought for 1 year and 6 months, and that was against Tristan Lindy, which you can see there, his record 2-3, hasn't been fighting at the very highest level. I do think Kasey Tanner looks more well-rounded than what Matsumoto does. But again, like I said, it's hard to take that into consideration when he's been doing it against not a very high level of opponent. He's light on his feet with his movement. He's good in the clinch, and he has got good takedowns. He does look to get the fight to the ground, where his transitions are very good. He's always looking to transition when he's on the ground. He's not content with just laying and praying. He's always looking to improve his positions and look for submissions. He does have 2 submission wins, and I do think that's an area of this fight where he could look better than Matsumoto if he's able to get those takedowns. And at the moment, the line is Matsumoto is a slight favourite at -145 and Kasey Tanner +115 underdog. Look, you've heard me just say that I think there's red flags with the fact that Kasey Tanner hasn't fought for so long and hasn't fought at a very high level when he has been fighting. But I do think there is decent value here as Tanner as an underdog, because I do think he's a more well-rounded fighter, and the fact that he's been training with some of the best fighters in the country, has been training with Henry Cejudo, getting to pick the mind of one of the best ever, I think that's a really good base for him. And that kind of doesn't level the fact that he hasn't been active, but the fact that he's probably carried on training with those caliber of fighters doesn't level it out, but it does bring it back a little bit more. And that's why I do think he's a decent underdog here at +115. He's, like I said, he's got good sprawling and transitions on the ground, and he does look to improve his position. He's got good top pressure when he's on the ground as well, and he does show good patience. He doesn't just jump for submissions or relentlessly ground and pound and lose positions. He's got good patience when he's on the ground. And I do think that's an area where he could kind of excel in this fight if he is able to get it to the ground. But like I said, Matsumoto is a good fighter, and something that he has shown in his few fights that I've taped of him is that he is a very powerful striker that uses leg kicks very often, and his leg kicks are very, very powerful. He doesn't really fight on the outside. He looks to try and get in the face of his opponent because he is quite a small bantamweight. You can see there he's 5'6", and Kasey Tanner will have a reach advantage over him, and that's something that I would expect Kasey Tanner to try and utilise. I think he'll try and utilise that reach advantage, and he will probably try and stay on the outside and then look to close the distance with a flurry of strikes, possibly get Matsumoto against the cage where he's going to work for his takedowns, and then subsequently look for a submission possibly. Matsumoto though, he does land takedowns of his own, and they tend to be big slams when he's got his opponent against the cage. He'll look to get in the face of his opponent because of the fact that he will be at a reach disadvantage. He'll look to close that distance with a flurry of powerful strikes, get them against the cage, and then look to try and land a big slam takedown. I'm going to edge Kasey Tanner, and I'm going to say that he gets the decision win. I think that if he can get his grappling going and get his striking at distance going and use his reach advantage, I think he could look good in this fight. And it might be a case of after the fight thinking, oh well, the layoff didn't play into Matsumoto's favour at all. So I am going to go for the upset here, and I'm going to say Kasey Tanner by decision. Next up, we've got AJ Cunningham versus Stephen Nguyen. Again, this seems to be a running theme of the Contender series this week. Stephen Nguyen has not fought for 722 days. That, again, is just a big red flag for me. Although he looked good in his last fight on the Contender series, he looked very good, and maybe that's why he hasn't fought again. Maybe he thought that because he wasn't offered a contract from getting the win last time out, where he did look good, maybe he just thought, well, I'm not going to go back to a regional show and fight on a regional show where there's a possibility that I lose. I might as well just wait for another Contender series opportunity, and maybe that's what maybe that's what his thought process was, and it could look to be a good thought process if he does come out and get the win against AJ Cunningham. He's a decent favourite, a moderate favourite at -205, -250. Sorry, he's a favourite at -250. He's got 3 wins by knockout, 3 submissions, and 2 submissions. He's got 3 wins by knockout, 3 submissions, and 2 decisions, whereas AJ Cunningham's got 3 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 3 decisions. AJ Cunningham, like I said, has been the more active fighter. He has been more active. Fought Jason Mullen at Fury 2 months ago. Fought Shay Connolly at LFA a year ago. He's been more active than what Stephen Nguyen has, because he hasn't fought in a year. And then before that, it was his last fight before that was 2 years, 5 months ago. So that for me is again a big red flag. I don't like when fighters are inactive and then come in, and especially when they're fighting at Contender Series, because like I said, you're fighting someone who's looking to get a contract into the UFC. That's a big motivation for these fighters. Nguyen does train at Fortis MMA, and Saif Saud is one of the best coaches in the game. He's one of the best tactical mindsets in the game. And again, that's like where I said for the last fight, where Kasey Tanner fights at Fight Ready MMA. Again, this could be a case with Stephen Nguyen, where he's training at such a high level gym that maybe the inactivity won't be as detrimental as I think it will. Even though he hasn't fought for 722 days, he is still the big favourite here, minus 250. And I do think that's kind of fair if you're taking into consideration just the two skill sets of the fighters. But yeah, I think that in this fight, Stephen Nguyen is the more calculated, the more technical striker. And I do think he is the more well-rounded. The fact that he's been so inactive again is a concern to me, but I will be taking Stephen Nguyen by decision. I do think he is just more well-rounded, like I said. And if he can really find his feet early in this fight and shake off the cobwebs, I think he could go on to just sail towards a decision. So I will be taking Stephen Nguyen by decision for my prediction for this fight. And then in the main event, we've got James Llontop versus Malik Lewis in the lightweight division. This one's interesting because Malik Lewis has previously fought on Contender Series against Trevor Peake, where in my opinion he just didn't look great, and Trevor Peake isn't someone that I'm massively sold on. I think Trevor Peake's very, very sloppy. I'm actually quite surprised he was signed. I think the only reason he was signed from that win was because of the fact that it was a come from behind victory. Malik Lewis did have him hurt in that first round and almost finished him. But because of the fact that it was on late notice, he gassed out from there when he couldn't get the finish, and that just allowed Trevor Peake to get back into the fight and finish him. Malik Lewis is more of a counter striker. He's going to look to throw counters, one-shot counters, like big hook counters. And to be honest, he doesn't do it extremely well. He's quite slow with it. He throws looping counters, looping hooks. The thing with Malik Lewis as well is that I've noticed is that because of the fact that he's quite unorthodox and sloppy, his rhythm kind of causes his opponents problems, and that's kind of what I expect in this fight. I expect his rhythm to be a bit of a task for Llontop to try and deal with. I think the fact that ultimately his striking isn't very clean, I just think the fact that his rhythm, paired with the fact that he has got powerful counters, I think that's what causes his opponent most issues. Where James Llontop's sloppy is his grappling. I do think Malik Lewis possibly has the slight edge in the grappling. He's not going to look to chase a takedown, I don't think, but if Llontop gets sloppy with his striking and an opportunity presents itself for Malik Lewis to take the fight to the ground, I think he could do that, and I do think in this fight he could be the one that does look like the better grappler. I do think there's decent value here for Malik Lewis. James Llontop is a minus 180 favourite. Malik Lewis currently plus 150. I do think that Malik Lewis could get this job done, even though James Llontop is probably the more experienced fighter, despite only being 23 years old and probably has fought at a higher level than what Malik Lewis has. I do think there is good value there for Malik Lewis because of the skills that he possesses. And like I said, the fact that James Llontop does have a tendency to sometimes look quite sloppy. But yeah, I'm going to go with Malik Lewis, round 3 finish. Don't know whether he's going to get it done by knockout or submission, but I'm going to go round 3 Malik Lewis. I do think this one could go over the 1.5, so it'll be interesting to see what that line is. And on that note, if you do want our plays for this card, check out the betting guide. You can find it in the description below. And that is my full card predictions for Dana White's Contender Series Week 6. So yeah, go and check over on the betting guide to see what our official picks are for this card. You might see some picks on there that I haven't mentioned in this fight, some over 1.5s, some under 1.5s. So yeah, go and check out that betting guide to see what our picks are, and I'll catch you in the next video.